Let's be for real. The first Thanksgiving dinner about the Pilgrims and Indigenous people being all kumbaya after years of massacre, colonization, and disease, I don't buy that they were one big happy family for a second, because whose family ever has a functional Thanksgiving dinner? Today, we're debunking that myth with a little bit of Indigenous American history that still affects Indigenous folk in today's government and contemporary society. Let's get one thing straight. Thanksgiving wasn't a feast or celebration of union. It was a complete horror. Before we get into why, hit subscribe. We're planning on debunking more holidays soon, so if this video was interesting, you're gonna want to stay tuned. Let's begin. Right off the bat, one of the most crucial sides in all of this is that of the Wampanoag Nation. Contact and conflict between Native Americans and non-native settlers is often looked at as one singular event, like the first Thanksgiving dinner. Really though, this contact spanned over a long period of time. In 1620, the first Pilgrims arrived and settled in Wampanoag land in Plymouth, Massachusetts. For over the next 300 years, they were killed, tortured, and made vulnerable to foreign life-threatening disease, separated from their families, and forced to fight tirelessly for the rights to the land that was theirs in the first place. Despite all of this, they still helped the very people who stole their land from them fight to gain independence from Great Britain during the American Revolution in 1775. For starters, there's no proof that the Wampanoag people were even invited to the feast. An account from the time claimed 90 members were present, but other experts believe these were actually men sent from a Wampanoag army in response to the sound of gunshots from firearms used during the celebration. Also, the first encounter between the Wampanoag people and the Pilgrims was when the Pilgrims stole from the tribe's winter rations during their own struggle to establish themselves. It truthfully wasn't even until later that an alliance was formed between the groups. And even then, the alliance was only a way to ensure the survival of the Wampanoag people who were just overwhelmed with diseases brought by the Europeans. In their alliance, however, the settlers learned the indigenous way of life and turned it against them. Like, imagine if you taught a house guest of yours to cook a family recipe, and then they made it in bulk, sold it all, gave you none of the profit or credit, killed your family, and now they're considered the Christopher Columbus of pies? Yeah. But after the so-called feast and celebration, they waited long months for the first harvest of the crops that were said to have been brought by both peoples. Instead of being granted respect and peace, many native people were subject to awful conditions. The Europeans repaid their native allies by seizing their land and imprisoning, enslaving, and executing them. Some of the earliest celebrations of Thanksgiving even included vulgar and offensive celebrations marking the tragic victories over native people, like the Pequot Massacre of 1636 or the beheading of Wampanoag leader Metacom in 1676. The consequences of colonization and the encounters between Europeans and Indigenous peoples have been echoing throughout history ever since. The lasting effects on Native American tribes not limited to the Wampanoag people include the loss of lands, decimation of cultures, and the ongoing socio-economic challenges they face today. A small but clear example is in grocery stores on reservations right now. Prices are constantly inflated, higher than you would ever see anywhere else, like $25 for some strawberries kind of high. Some studies say that Native Americans represent less than 1% of the student population in the United States. It's all evidence that Native communities are still being actively, economically, and socially isolated. Also, only 175 out of the original more than 300 Native languages remain today, according to the Indigenous Language Institute. They predicted only 20 or so will remain by 2050. Fortunately, as people begin to learn the real history of the United States, changes are becoming more common for the better of these communities. The United Nations even declared the decade between 2022 to 2032 the International Decade of the World's Indigenous People. As for Thanksgiving, instead of colonizers thanking God for his abundant blessings like they did in the 1600s, the holiday is now celebrated across the United States as a day where families give thanks for the positives in their life, spend time together, and eat good food. So, as we celebrate Thanksgiving this year, let's take some time to embrace an educated and respectful perspective instead of giving in to willful ignorance. Talk about it with your families while you're eating corn, which, by the way, was cultivated by the indigenous tribes of Mexico. By understanding the truth of what is being celebrated, acknowledging the historical resilience of indigenous communities, and supporting initiatives like the ones on screen right now, you can contribute to a more inclusive society that values the rich shared history of the United States. Thank you for watching this video. It was about time we took a dive into the myths and legends that make up Thanksgiving. Don't forget, like, hit subscribe, and leave us a comment of one thing you are grateful for this year. I'm grateful for everyone watching this video. Join us next time. Who knows what mystery will unravel next on Things of Legends.